star upon the tree. Get caught up in the magic and all the mystery. Cheer up, Ebenezer, just forget the blues. The Christmas story's here and it's good news. Love's divine.
Hello and welcome to the Nature Garden podcast with me, Carl Steinson, and the Weekending Show team from Lionheart Radio. Come along with us as we take a bonny wee wander along nature paths, shorelines, riverbanks, through woods and wetlands, parks and gardens, and it's a chance to hear some great music and Northumbrian stories. On today's show, colouring the winter months and creating shelter with hedging, Tom Pattinson's here to tell us more. The rising of the sun and the running of the deer, and our Steve Lowe, who's saving trees from deer with lambswool. And Tom Cadwallender's enjoying a performance of the seedcracker, a winter visitor to his garden with a mighty beak. And did you know that the turkey isn't from Turkey? Tom's tracking this festive superstar. Plus some top tips for the garden from Tom P. All coming up on the Nature Garden podcast.
Let's bring peace to the world. Let's bring joy to the world. The wonder of life and a bright star shining above. An amazing story all about the power of love.
Winter's showing its face as the temperatures fall and autumn says goodbye here in Northumberland, and Tom Pattinson's looking at the bountiful benefits of winter plants.
I'm sure you've heard the expression year-round colour in the garden. Well, this is the time of year that it really kicks in, and it's been really worthwhile in planning it. Some years ago we decided we had to do something about filtering the wind, where about half a mile as the crow flies, or any other bird for that matter, from the North Sea, and the salt-laden winds come in from there. The prevailing wind is the westerly wind, and if we'd had a stone wall round, or perhaps fencing, and it would just come over the top and create turbulence on the inside of the garden. We needed something with sort of a filtering effect. And the hedges we have around the garden, now maturing, really do it well. There's a hawthorn, partly hawthorn. There's a privet hedge, two privet hedges. There's a mixed one with ilex in, the holly, and a long one with the beech, Fagus sylvatica. And they're all more or less, apart from a few pieces of hawthorn in one of the hedges, they're all semi-evergreen, fully evergreen and semi-evergreen. Even the beech, which is designated a deciduous plant, it hangs onto those dead leaves throughout the winter time and refuses to let go of them until spring arrives, and they fall off, give way to the bursting buds, new growth coming out. And throughout the winter we can see the birds foraging in it through against the light. Quite amazing. It's a lovely place for them to feed and to roost and so on. You've heard this expression, year-round colour in the garden. That's something else we aimed for. We wanted there to be a filtering of the wind, but we also wanted select shrubs and ornamental trees that would give us colour at different times of the year. And there's quite a selection at the moment. It comes from a coloured bark, their leaves, their fruits, and of course some flowers. Quite amazing. You've heard that old expression, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. That certainly applies to some of the winter flowering shrubs. Down at ground level, we have the ericas, carnias, the winter heathers so-called. They're actually in flower now, and they get to about maximum height, 30 centimetres, 45, some outstanding ones, but they line the driveway and they're in little groups in other parts of the garden, and those flowers, which have opened now, they continue flowering, believe it or not, way through to mid, even the end of March next year. It's quite extraordinary how they work, but that's what they do. And the bonus here for insect life hereabouts is if there's a decent February morning, we get bumblebees collecting nectar and pollen from those dwarf heathers. They're colourful as well all of the time. Of course, they're ground covering, which means they smother weeds. They've got all sorts of good things going for them. So consider heathers in the garden. A bit taller up, we have plants such as the winter jasmine, the yellow flowers there. No fragrance at all, but beautiful flowers on that. And then a couple of viburnums, the Viburnum tinus, which has the white flowers, evergreen of course. The birds love that for shelter, roosting at night time. And then there's the taller one, the Viburnum bonantensted dawn, the pink clusters of flowers which are highly fragrant. On top of that, we have Mahonia, a Mahonia charity, evergreen, spiky-leaved, but racemes, golden racemes of charity at the moment. They're just a joy to behold. So we've got these different shrubs which are doing a good job for us. They're attractive at this time of year, really put a smile on your face when you go around the garden. But we also have, of course, the that filtering effect of the wind, as I mentioned earlier, and then there's the wildlife that takes advantage of it. During the depths of winter, even the ivy on the walls of the house, there's controlled spots of ivy where a wren nests generally, sometimes a robin, but the wren always picks one of the spots of ivy on the wall. But at this time of year, it's the most attractive, it's variegated type, it's the most attractive to look at, but inside it's teeming, believe it or not, with invertebrate life, insects of different types and insect eggs, and the birds going foraging for that. It's an absolute joy to have these plants in the garden.
Northumberland's a great place for walking, but you don't have to go far, as our gardens are amazing places for birds. Tom Cadwallender from the British Trust for Ornithology has been checking out some of the visitors to his feeders at home.
You may or may not know that I walk miles almost every day looking for birds. 8-10 miles is my norm, for when I'm wandering. And you see some great things when you're out and about. However, I'm still very keen on garden birds. And I feed garden birds. And I make sure that my feeders are topped up. I have two main feeders. One is got mixed seed in it, sort of from small things right up to sunflower seeds, and the other one is pure sunflower seeds, black sunflower seeds. So the birds got to work a little bit at them to get the shells off them. And the species that I kind of normally attract are kind of a few chaffinches, the odd greenfinch, goldfinch occasionally, but a lot of house sparrows, which I'm very pleased with considering they're on the decline, and also have a good smattering of tree sparrows. Now, tree sparrows in the south of the country are really under a lot of pressure, but in the northeast, Northumberland particularly, coastal plain, we're doing very well, thank you very much. And they really are quite successful. So yes, garden birds are pretty special, and I'm quite happy that we have all these things coming into the garden. Whilst I've already mentioned I spend a significant chunk of time out in the field looking for birds and any other wildlife, it was my garden which provided the next or the latest birding experience, and it was fantastic. What I want you to do is just picture the scene. Here I was sitting in my kitchen, just casually looking out the window one lunchtime a couple of days ago, and I was on the phone. I was trying to contact a colleague, and I dialed the number and I was waiting for it to connect on my mobile phone, and I just casually glanced out the window, and I mentioned I've got these two bird feeders out there, and these two feeders are hanging from the same apparatus, if you like. Anyway, looking out the window casually, waiting for the phone to connect, I see this larger than normal bird trying to land on these feeders. Now this bird was bigger than a starling, about the same sort of size as a starling rather. So it's about 5-6 inches big, roundish with a short tail. And what caught my eye, because it was quite ungainly and it tried to land on these feeders, and it spread its tail, it's quite a short tail, and I could see these white spots at the end of the tails, which caught me quite by surprise. And I was thinking to myself, goodness, what's this? And I immediately thought of waxwings, because there's a few waxwings around. Then I quickly sort of cast that out of my mind. And I was panicking. I was, where's my bins? Where's my binoculars? Where's my camera? And what's going on here? Anyway, this bird sort of tried to land and couldn't. Anyway, it dropped to the lawn. And I got my bins on it, and I realised it was a hawfinch. I don't know if you've ever seen hawfinches or come across hawfinches, but they're the biggest and the baddest of all of the finch family. They're about twice the size of a greenfinch at least, and they have this pinkish, greyish wash to it. A couple of wing flashes, but they've got sort of dark patches through the eye, and they've got this quite distinctive black chin patch. And as I've mentioned, it has these white spots at the end, or pale spots at the end of the tail. But the bill is the biggest finch bill you can imagine. And as finches go, it's got a conal bill used for cracking open all sorts of seeds. And believe it or not, this bird was actually feeding on the discarded black sunflower seeds, which are lying on the lawn. These house sparrows, which have been feeding there, are very particular. And if they don't like the look of one, they'll throw it away. Anyway, so this hawfinch was actually feeding on these discarded sunflower seeds. And it was fantastic. It just sat there, feeding away, then it lifted ever so slightly and got into the tree, our apple tree, and it sat there for a little while, then came back down. This bird was around for 2 or 3 days. Normally, with hawfinches, we do see them coming across in the wintertime in very, very small numbers, so they are quite scarce. But they love hornbeams, and that's usually where you see them, around big old hornbeams. Home Park in Alnwick is a favourite place where you might see a handful every other winter, and Abbey Fields near Morbith is another place that you might see the odd one in the distance, sitting on top of a hornbeam, this big lump. And I just remember back to the kind of 1970s when I saw my first hawfinches in Northumberland, and they were at Wallington Hall, and there was a flock of about 14 of them there. They have bred in small numbers, but they're long gone as breeders to this part of the world. So they just come across as winter visitors from Central Europe. Quite incredible, really, in very, very small numbers, which is absolutely fantastic. So there we are, I have a hawfinch sitting in my garden. So I put the word out to birding pals through our WhatsApp group, and I got a couple of calls. People come, can I come and have a look? Can I come and see the hawfinch in your garden? Absolutely brilliant news, and it was really quite exciting. And a lot of folks through the house looking at this hawfinch, and it stayed for 2 to 3 days. It may have been around earlier, but I didn't see it. But yes, you never know with these things. So yes, imagine that, a hawfinch, absolutely fantastic. I was so chuffed to bits to get this really unusual garden visitor for me anyway. But it just shows, you can spend all the time you like out in the field looking for birds, and you just got to be careful. They could be just on the tip of your tongue, on the tip of your nose, just in your garden, just waiting to be seen. And my phone call, I was saying earlier that I was waiting for this phone call to connect. Actually, I was so in a panic, I forgot to switch the phone off, and I had put the phone in my pocket, and I could hear this little voice from my pocket saying, "Hello, is anybody there? Hello." And I quickly had to switch the thing off whilst I gorged myself on wonderful views of this immature, perhaps female hawfinch. Oh, so exciting. I can tell you, it's so exciting. So unusual. I was chuffed to bits. So yes, never underestimate your garden. Okay, folks, gan canny.
The dormant days of winter are great for planting hardy plants and trees, ready in time for them to wake up and start growing in spring. And, as Tom explains, hips and haws can provide important food for the birds.
It's worth bearing in mind that if you're contemplating planting a fruit tree or bush or ornamental trees or shrubs, anything of that nature, maybe a hedge, a row of hedge plants, get them planted. If that's the case, then there's no real panic about doing it. Obviously, about this time, worthwhile getting them in, but this time for planting bare-rooted subjects whilst they're in dormancy, it lasts all the way through winter until the point of spring. In this area, generally about mid-March, things are starting to shoot, and it's a bit late for it then. So keep an eye on the weather forecast, and if you see that 2 or 3 days going to be a bit calmer and no frost, then go for it. If, for example, there's a hedge, there's quite a lot of choice here. At the moment, you'll find common or garden hedging plants tied in bundles, the beech, the privet, the hawthorn, hornbeam, things of that nature. You will find them tied in bundles, buy them, and if you're going to plant them, if you want a thick, a decent, impenetrable hedge that's going to work for you, rather than the straight line, if you can afford it, then do a staggered line, two apart, staggered just like brickwork, and that will get you off to a flying start with your hedge, which I previously mentioned, filtering effect, etc. in your garden. But it gives you a screen as well, keeps a little bit of privacy in the garden. And if you can't afford to pay for the plants, there's a slower way, but it takes a while. If you take some hardwood stem cuttings of existing plants, for example, some of the shrubs that we have, say the Rosa rugosa, the shrub rose, Rosa rugosa, which is a beauty, the flowers, but mainly for those large oval-shaped hips that it bears. Very attractive, and the birds love them, of course. If you take some stem cuttings of that, normal run-of-the-mill garden roses, which we buy, the hybrid teas and so on, they take quite a while to get themselves organised in making roots if you take a stem cutting. But shrub roses, rugosa, they're pretty fast in responding. You just take a leaf out of nature's book, look at them in the countryside, how they spread. And they can make a beautiful screen in your garden, or an effective hedge, of course, given that there are 1 or 2 thorns in there as well, quite a barrier. That's a possibility. And in the countryside at the moment, there are still a lot of haws. That's the fruit of the hawthorn, the crataegus, which the birds will gobble them up over winter through time. Well, if you collect some of those and you stratify them, that is, plant them or sow them into a pot, preferably a terracotta or clay pot if you can, but a plastic pot will do if you have nothing else, and you put a layer of compost in, probably about 2 or 3 centimetres into it, fairly large pot, and then you put a layer of these fruits, the haws, and then you cover them with another layer of compost, and then another layer, in layers or stratas, and then you put them outside in the open to the elements, frost the lot, and what this is doing is, over winter, certain seeds and fruits have an inhibitor built in to prevent germination, to prevent it during winter. So during winter, that process of the frost, it gets rid of the inhibitor, and in the spring, they're ready to start germinating and growing. This is a slow process, but you can do it and apply to different fruits, from acorn, anything you wish. Give it a try, and it doesn't cost anything. Everything's happening outdoors, and then when the spring arrives, either let them germinate where they are, or knock them out of the pot, put them into fresh compost, and give them a mild warmth to encourage them to germinate. These things save a lot of money in time.
Deer are beautiful, nimble, fast, graceful and cute, and we have lots of them in Northumberland, which is great, but they can be a problem for trees. Steve Lowe from the Northumberland Rivers Trust is out and about working on woodland protection and weaving his magic with lambswool.
Well, it's just about coming to the end of the day and the sun's sinking below the horizon there. I'm in a small woodland in North Northumberland. Once again, I'm doing some survey work for the Northumberland Rivers Trust. I've just stopped at this particular point because this woodland, although it's not very big, it's actually stuffed full of deer. And I've just seen 3 little white rumps disappearing over the top of one hill on one side. That's to the south, and then to the north I've seen another 4. And when I came in, I seen another 6. So there's an awful lot of deer in this area, and they're all roe deer, which are the commonest type that we get in Northumberland. And I was just chatting with a farmer a few minutes ago, said unfortunately he'd had to put one out of its misery because it had got caught on a barbed wire fence as it was jumping over. And it was a buck. It was quite an old buck by the looks of it, so maybe he didn't have the spring in his step. But he'd actually caught on this wire and unfortunately couldn't get off. So that's a shame. But although everyone will be thinking, oh, deer are great, but actually in terms of establishing woodland, they're a fairly big problem. It's one of the reasons why we're having to put up, when you do woodland, you put them inside plastic tubes. Now, the Rivers Trust is actually really keen to avoid this where we can, so we've started to use a different mechanism. And we put a substance which is made from lambswool, and it's sort of like a lanolin type stuff, and it's called Trico. And we coat the trees in that before we put them out. And where possible, we're not putting plastic tubes on, because that just means that in 5-6 years' time, you have to take them off. And I spent most of yesterday in the pouring rain, I would add, just to make you give us a wee bit of sympathy, obviously, removing these plastic tubes from Morpeth Common. And most of them just go for disposal. It's such a waste. And the tree doesn't cost very much, up to 50p. The rest of the paraphernalia costs, £2 or £3. So we're starting to think it's probably better to put more trees in without the protection and hope that the deer will leave a few alone. Worth an experiment anyway. And we're also putting them into things called corrals. So rather than having tubes around each of the trees, we're putting a fence protection around a larger number of trees with the hope that they will be left alone. Still treated with Trico, but that they'll be left alone and that the trees will carry on growing. And what we do know already is that the deer don't like to be inside those fences. They like to browse, but they don't like to be inside the fences. And while I'm standing here, I'm just going to also point out I've seen a couple of brown hare. I'm looking down at the floor at autumn's glories, mushrooms and fungi coming through. And in this particular woodland, we've got a load of puffballs. Puffballs are just literally, as the sound, are like a circular, rounded ball, but with a little tiny hole on the top that the spores come out of. So the fungi itself is under the ground, but these very pale brown are the fruiting bodies. I can also hear a couple of buzzards mewling away in the background as well. Of course, at this time of year, there's no leaves on the trees. They're all on the bottom of the floor. And after the rains we've had, this woodland's actually really quite wet. So Not surprisingly, a few frogs as well, which is still quite mild actually today. But the one thing I've noticed as well is how many bird feeders there are in this woodland, so it's obviously looked after as a gamekeeping thing, and there'll be loads of pheasants around somewhere, although I haven't seen many in this particular location. Anyway, I'm having a canny day. I hope that hasn't been such a boring thing to talk about, because you see the deer and you think they're lovely, but they are a bit of a problem. So we've got to look after the countryside, look after the trees we're putting in, but also hopefully they can carry on doing what they do best, munching, but without any problems to us. Cheers now, gan canny.
I'm Tom Heap from Countryfile, and you're listening to the Nature Garden podcast.
Birds are central to many of the stories, songs and celebrations of Christmas. And for some, the turkey is the star as it becomes the centrepiece of the Christmas dinner. Tom Cadwallender's looking at the globe-trotting turkey.
Christmas is coming, the goose is getting fat. So the old nursery rhyme went. But actually, the Christmas is coming, but it's not goose or geese that we normally associate with Christmas these days. In fact, geese are, even in those days, was more of a feature in the Feast of Michaelmas. But traditionally now, in the last sort of 200 years or so, we've gone for turkeys. Turkeys are kind of pretty heavily domesticated at the current time. But really, the bird that we know today bears no resemblance to the bird that comes from the wild. Of course, they were domesticated during the 15th and 16th century when they were brought across from North America to Europe, following the kind of the European sort of colonization of the North American continent. Turkeys are found wild in the Americas. There are two species. One, the ocellated turkey, is quite a range-restricted bird. It's only found in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, whilst the turkey that we're more familiar with is found in North America and indeed down into northern Mexico through Texas. Scientific name is Meleagris galliparvo, and no relation to turkey at all. And you think, well, where on earth did the name turkey come from? But actually, it was after it was imported into, or exported, if you like, from North America, brought into North Africa, and then kind of domesticated. And the big turkey farming area was kind of in the Middle East, and then into Turkey. And that's where the name comes from Turkey. The fact that the birds that were coming into Northern Europe and the UK particularly during that period, the sort of from the 16th through the 17th century, we were bringing the birds in from Turkey. That's how the name stuck. So yes, it's got nothing to do with the fact that it's from North America. And interestingly, the North Americans have turkey as their traditional Thanksgiving Day food, not at Christmas time as we do. But anyway, that's another story altogether. But yes, here we have this great tradition of having turkeys at Christmas time. But this year may well be disrupted as well, of course. And you'll cast your mind back to the avian flu that was around during the breeding season and this last summer, and we lost an awful lot of our breeding seabirds through avian flu, avian influenza. Indeed, last winter we had quite a lot of our wildfowl, a lot of geese fell foul, if you like, if you pardon the expression, to avian flu last winter. But it's more prevalent in domestic stocks, domestic fowl stocks. And there's talk now of a shortage of free-range turkeys this coming Christmas. And what an insidious thing this avian bird flu is. It's just, it's absolutely dreadful. But yes, it's here. It's really quite a concern. So I hope we don't see too much devastation and we all have our kind of traditional turkey if that's what we like. So there are an awful lot of anomalies around, some crazy things with folklore and so forth. And yeah, turkey's on from Turkey. And hope you all have a good Christmas, folks. And I look forward to seeing you in the new year. Bye now.
And to the sound of War Blackbird, here's Tom with some things to be getting on with in the garden.
So it's jobs for the week time, and each day I'll be out there inspecting the vegetable beds because the produce for winter is harvesting at the moment. There's the leeks, the Musselburgh leek, which is really tough, hardly stands up to all sorts of weather, especially tough frosts, and it tastes delicious. They're the Brussels sprouts. It's Winston, large sprouts, tall plant, which needed staking against the wind, but they're producing well. They've had the first touch of frost on them, which makes them taste so much sweeter, I feel anyway, so we're enjoying those. And then there's the perpetual spinach, which we sowed last April. Within 3 weeks of germinating, we had micro leaves to harvest, to eat in salads, and then the larger leaves for cooking later, and it's gone all through summer, cut and come again basis. The more leaves you cut, the more new shoots that sends up, leaf shoots. And then when we get to about this stage of the year, very soon, it's looking a bit ragged. There's a little bit of slug damage, which is natural. But I take the garden clippers and I cut it from about 30 to 45 centimetres from that height, which it's reached, down to about 5 centimetres, just stubs left. And it rejuvenates it. It'll start growing again within a couple, 3 weeks maybe. And it grows all the way through winter and until it's time to sow fresh seed next year and we dig out the old plants. It's really good value for money, about £3 for a packet with so many seeds in. Year-round plant almost, just brilliant. So much for the vegetable beds, but before we leave them, I just last week took down the runner bean supports, and I'd left 1 or 2 runner beans on until the pods turned a really deep brown and dried out and withered, and inside were some beautiful beans, and I've saved those, put them into a paper bag, and they're in a cool room which is dry conditions, and they will reproduce for me to save me buying seeds next year. I do this each year. Moving on from that, I'm collecting seeds outside, 1 or 2 seed heads with a few capsules with seeds left in, and they will reproduce for me. If it's an F1 hybrid, a first filial or first generation hybrid, it produces exactly what it says on the packet, the colour, the size, etc. But if you save the seeds of an F1 hybrid, and quite a few of them do set seeds, if you save them, when you sow them next year, they're a second generation hybrid. So it'll not be true to form like the first one. These will have one of the parent plants and some of the other parent plant in. But they're still decent plants, worthwhile doing that. Now, there are other freebies around the garden at the moment. If you look around, you'll find seeds that the birds have deposited, seeds of things like cotoneaster berries they've eaten, or berberis berries. So we get lots of little cotoneaster plants and barberry plants, which you dig up and pot them on, or plant them where you want them, plants for free. If you look around the front of a mixed border where there are hellebores, you'll see that the hellebores just sow seeds where they are, and you get lots of seedlings, and the colour of the flowers of these tends to vary, so they're quite interesting to save and plant. The cytises, or the broom, the yellow and white, of course, broom plant, it has an explosive mechanism. It turns inside out the seed capsule and throws its seeds around. So does the little viola pansy family. It explodes when it's ripe and throws the seeds around. Quite interesting. So you get lots of seedlings around those 2 plants. I'm collecting also from the greenhouse. I kept 1 or 2 tomatoes back which were green. they have reddened up and ripened now, and I just squeeze them apart, extract the seeds from them, put them on a kitchen paper towel, and leave them on there to dry, and then turn it over and put it away for next year. When I sow, I don't have to sow them individually. I'll just sow them on the paper, on a tray, and they'll germinate through there. I do that quite often, and I have to do it with one or two that are lying round. I'm currently spreading organic matter over the vegetable bed, let the birds work it in for me, and I'm looking around the garden every day to see what's happening, especially in the greenhouse, because we've had some frosty nights recently, and my Christmas potatoes are still in pots, still have the haulms on them, the growth on the top, and I'm looking forward to sampling them soon. Whatever you're doing, in the coming week, enjoy your gardening.
Write Christmas cards in the kitchen, share some festive food, hang mistletoe up for kisses and get holly from the wood. Put the Yule log on the fire, fill your cup with cheer. It's time for peace and joy, Christmas is here.
You've been listening to gardener Tom Pattinson, birder Tom Cadwallender from the British Trust for Ornithology, and Steve Lowe from the Northumberland Rivers Trust. I'm Carl Steinson, and don't forget you can listen back to all the previous reports we've done on the Nature Garden podcast. That's the Nature Garden podcast. Enjoy your gardening and time outdoors with nature. Bye for now.
Let's bring joy to the world. The wonder of life and a bright star shining above. An amazing story all about the power of love. The drummer boy has got his sticks and the fiddler's got a bow. The carol singers have wrapped up warm and the lanterns are starting to glow. The bells are ringing and the ding-dong dinging, it must be Christmas time. The bells are ringing and the ding-dong dinging, it must be Christmas time. And the drummer boy has got his sticks and the fiddler's got a bow. The carol singers have wrapped up warm and the lanterns are starting to glow. The bells are ringing and the ding-dong dinging, it must be Christmas time. The bells are